My best friend since elementary school, who I'll call Alice, passed away in February from cancer. She had a 2-year-old daughter who went into the custody of her mom after she passed away, who I'll call Alexis. Last month, Alexis showed up on our doorstep unannounced, telling my husband he needs to take responsibility for his child and either take custody or start finally paying child support. She says that Alice had told her when her daughter was born who the father was, but didn't want anything to do with him. To answer the inevitable, Alice was a traveling nurse and made a lot of money, which is the only reason I can think of for why she didn't go for child support. During this conversation, my husband had the worst panic attack he's ever had. So we had to end the conversation before I could get more details. My husband's story is, I don't even know he said that Alice's daughter is probably his, but that it isn't what I think. Almost 3 years ago, we threw a large housewarming party as we just moved into our dream home, after I finally finished residency and was set to make real money for once. Alice was in town and set to be at the party, but I was called into work before she got there. I didn't get back till after 3 a.m. Party was winding down, my husband was passed out upstairs, and Alice had already left the party, which at the time I did find strange as we hadn't seen each other in months. My husband claims he woke up in the middle of the night to Alice on top of him, but he passed out again before he could say anything. He claims he never told me because he was worried I wouldn't believe him, which I don't know if I do. He showed me some texts he sent his best friend the next day asking for his advice about him, thinking someone roped him, but if he cheated he could have had that conversation as evidence, especially since he never said Alice specifically. Ever since the party he has been very distant with Alice, and after she had her daughter he would even find excuses not to be around the house when she would visit at all. I don't know if that's because he cheated, or if Alice did actually rope him and this was his trauma response. Honestly, Reddit, I don't know what to do. I've known Alice since we were children, and she had never come across as that kind of person. But I've also known my husband for over a decade, and he's not once ever given the inclination of a cheater. He's an attractive guy, and I've seen the looks he gets at the gym, and he's never even given more than a glance. What the hell should I do? How do I figure out what the truth is here when Alice isn't even around to defend herself? She never even implied she liked my husband, let alone want to sleep with him. I told my husband he needs to get a DNA test before anything is decided on the child's part, but in the meantime he needs to move out while I think about what I'm going to do here. Relevant comments. Opie responds to Alice's behaviors when visiting her at home and if Alice would tell her about the affair. Opie: not that I noticed. She'd always been at least a little standoffish towards him as she thought I could do better. The first time she visited after she gave birth, she asked where he was since he wasn't home, for the first time, but she never asked again after that. I hadn't thought about that actually, thank you. That's a good point. She always thought I could do better than him. So if it was an affair you'd think she would have told me on her deathbed at least. Opie on if her husband drinks or not. Opie: not at all. He rarely drinks, and generally only at parties which at our ages are few and far between. He works a tough and stressful job, so I figured once he was buzzed he laid down and fell asleep. Not that he had drank more than normal or anything like that. Did Alice ever name the father of her baby? Opie: she told me it was a man she met while in another state for work. Short-term fling. Commenter: wait, I get that you need to process all this, but you've told the potential victim of rope that he needs to leave his home, his safe place, and you, his safe person. I think you've jumped the gun a bit here and shunned your life mate who may have been roped. Opie: yes, I'm starting to realize I've made a terrible mistake. Update 1. After talking with you, I've come to the realization that my husband is being truthful. My best friend roped him. Several people pointed out that with Alice not liking my husband, if it was an affair, she would have told me when she was dying, if only to separate us. You're absolutely right. I was there, in the room while she passed. I held her hands for days. We talked about so much. If it was just an affair, she would have told me. But if she roped my husband, she wouldn't have said a word. That's the type of thing horrible people take to the grave. I've also come to the realization that I made a terrible mistake asking my husband to leave for a few days while I gather my thoughts. Not to make excuses, but losing my best friend to cancer, a long cancer fight at that, was brutal. To say that I was devastated wouldn't do it justice. That it happened only 6 months ago, I'm still feeling it every day. So to have this thrown on me, it's like I'm losing her all over again. Either she betrayed me and fudged my husband, or she betrayed me and roped my husband. Not only have I lost her, but now I've lost the good memories, an entire lifetime's worth. It was impossible for me to look at him and not also see her, and be struck with the horror and realization of that loss all over again. I felt I needed to be able to break down, grieve, and think without the fresh wave of loss I got every time I saw him. It was wrong of me to ask him to leave, you're right though, and as of a few minutes ago I've righted this wrong. I called my husband, I apologized, told him I believe him, and begged him to come home. He'll be here in half an hour at most. and I'm going to support my husband the way I know he would have supported me. I've been an off and on Reddit user for several years, and sometimes the advice given on subreddits like these can be a bit hit or miss, but today you guys did good. You've helped me realize not only that I was wrong and being stupid at that, but that I was hurting the person that needed me the most. I was selfish. I have no idea what we're going to do as far as the potential daughter is concerned, but I can assure you we'll deal with it together. It's going to take a lot of time, and probably a lot of therapy, to grieve this new loss. I feel numb now, as though I'll never cry again. My best friend roped my husband, which means she was no friend of mine. She flaunted it, coming to my house, sitting with me, and gabbing. She brought her child here, trying to rub it in his face, right in front of me. She tortured the man I loved, and I was an unknowing party to it. I feel sick to my stomach over how many times she came over, just to hold it over him. I'm honestly at a loss on how to make that up to him. If you all have any ideas, please feel free to give them to me. I think I'll need all the help I can get. Tomorrow I'm going to take a leave of absence from work, just until we can figure out our next steps, and we can get our heads on straight. Commenter, could you ask Alexis what Alice told her about the affair? I'd be curious to hear the other side of the story. OP, I'll have to ask for more details, but Alexis only said that she knew about the affair, and that he needed to start being a father to his daughter. Commenter, women go decades without admitting when they are roped because of fear of people not believing them. I'm going to be honest, men will go twice as long and preferably take it to the grave, because almost always and automatically told it's not even possible for a man to be roped. I know you have to go on instinct, but his story makes sense with the texts he sent his friend. He also would hope to never be around the woman he is sure roped him again, which is why he made himself scarce after the fact. If he's a smart man like you claim, he would not have wanted you alone with Alice basically ever because she could reveal an affair. He would have tried to separate your bond. Instead he hid, because she couldn't really say she roped him. You say she wasn't a fan of his at all. She thought you could do better. So why wouldn't she spin it as he came onto to her? It's because she was the one in the wrong. Opie, thank you. I don't know what it is about this part, but it just clicks with me. You're absolutely right. With her level of disdain, if it was an affair, she certainly would have told me, if only to separate us, especially on her deathbed. I was in the room with her, holding one of her hands. She obviously took this to her grave, and the only reason she would is if she roped him. Update 2. So, things took an unexpected turn. My husband moved back in, and we've been trying to take things one step at a time. But as we were unpacking some of his stuff, he found an old USB drive buried in a drawer. He didn't remember where it came from, but it had Alice's handwriting on it. We were both hesitant, but eventually, curiosity got the better of us. When we plugged it in, there were only 2 files. One was a video labeled "For You," and another, just called "Goodbye." We sat there, staring at the screen, debating whether to watch them. It felt like Pandora's box. Whatever was in those files could change everything, and to be honest, neither of us was sure if we were ready for it. But ultimately, we decided to watch "For You." It was Alice. The video started with her looking more sick and frail than I had ever seen her, wearing the hospital gown she had been in when I last saw her. She looked directly at the camera and said, "If you're watching this, then I'm already gone. I have so much I need to tell you, and I need you to hear me out." What followed was a confession. She said that after the housewarming party, she felt incredibly lonely and resentful of the life we were building without her. That night, she got drunk, very drunk, and made a decision she deeply regretted. She didn't outright admit to roping him, but she did say, "I took something that wasn't mine, and I knew it wasn't right." Alice apologized for everything she put us through and for never coming clean. She admitted that the guilt ate away at her every day, but she was too ashamed to face me. She ended the video with, "I'm sorry for everything, and I hope someday you can forgive me." We were both in tears by the time the video ended. It didn't make anything easier, but it did confirm what we had feared. My husband was right. She did something terrible and took advantage of him. But here's the thing, neither of us could bring ourselves to watch the second video, Goodbye. Something about it felt final, like opening it would close the chapter on everything. We decided to save it for later, maybe when we're both ready to hear her last words. As for Alexis, we still haven't confronted her about what Alice told her. We need more time to process all of this before we open that can of worms. But I'm starting to wonder if she even knows the full story. She's only 2 years old and probably heard bits and pieces from her grandmother, who might have only heard Alice's side. We're going to get the DNA test done soon, but honestly, I'm dreading the results. If the test proves she's my husband's daughter, we're going to have to figure out what kind of role, if any, he will play in her life. But for now, we're taking things one day at a time, trying to rebuild the trust and find some sense of normalcy. It feels like this nightmare will never end, and every time I think we're getting closer to some kind of resolution, something else pops up. The USB was just another reminder that Alice, even in death, still has a hold on our lives. So that's where we're at, stuck in limbo, waiting for the next bombshell to drop. We haven't decided what to do with the video, and part of me wonders if we'll ever really be ready to watch it. I wish I had a more hopeful update, but this is where we are. We're surviving, but I don't know if we're healing yet. Only time will tell. Thanks again for all the support and advice. I'll keep you posted if anything else happens, but for now, we're just trying to make it through each day without falling apart. Update 3. So, life has been anything but quiet since the last update. We've been trying to settle back into some sort of routine, but it's been rough. Every time I look at my husband, I can't help but see that night replaying in my head, even though I wasn't there. It's like a ghost haunting our marriage. Alice ghost. We finally decided to confront Alexis's grandmother, let's call her Linda, about the situation. My husband and I agreed that it was time to get some answers, especially before the DNA test results come back. We needed to know what Alice had told Linda and what kind of story Alexis had been fed. When we called and asked to meet up, Linda was surprisingly calm. We met at a neutral place, a quiet coffee shop in town. The tension between us was thick enough to cut with a knife. Linda sat across from us, her eyes scanning our faces like she already knew something was up. I started the conversation by saying, "We need to talk about what Alice told you before she passed." Linda sighed heavily, like she'd been expecting this conversation for a while. She didn't try to sugarcoat anything. She told us that Alice had confessed about her one-night stand with my husband, but framed it as consensual. According to Alice, it was a drunken mistake they both regretted. Linda seemed almost apologetic as she relayed this information, like she wasn't sure whether to believe it herself. That's when I pulled out my phone and showed her the video of Alice's confession, the part where she admitted she took something that wasn't hers. Linda's face went pale, and she covered her mouth in shock. I could see the gears turning in her head, trying to reconcile the Alice she knew with the Alice in the video. She didn't say much after that, just sat there silently for a long time. Finally, she looked at us and said, "I'm sorry. I didn't know." We didn't press her for more information. I figured the video spoke for itself, and we had more than enough to deal with without dragging Linda into it further. But it was clear she was shaken, and maybe, just maybe, she'll start to reconsider what she tells Alexis as she grows up. After the meeting, my husband and I were both drained. We drove home in silence, not sure what to say to each other. It felt like we had uncovered another layer of betrayal, one that we didn't even know existed. Then came the DNA test results. I wish I could say I wasn't holding my breath when the results came back, but I was. Part of me hoped that the test would show he wasn't the father, that somehow we could escape this nightmare. But life isn't that simple, is it? He's the father. There it was, in black and white, staring back at us. My husband has a daughter with my best friend, and there's no one doing that. I think we both sat there for a solid hour, just staring at the results in stunned silence. What do you even say in a moment like that? There's no guidebook for this kind of situation, no right words to make it all go away. Eventually, my husband broke the silence. He said, "We need to figure out what's best for her." And he's right. As much as this situation sucks, there's a little girl in the middle of it all who didn't ask for any of this. We've decided to sit down with Linda again, this time to talk about custody arrangements. It's clear that my husband needs to step up as a father, but we're not sure what that's going to look like yet. We've also started seeing a therapist together and separately. We both have so much to unpack, and it's clear we're going to need professional help to navigate this. The therapist has been good for us, helping us communicate better and start to rebuild the trust that was shattered. But the weirdest thing? We still haven't watched that second video, Goodbye. It's like this looming shadow in the background, waiting for us to confront it. Part of me wonders if it even matters at this point. Maybe it's better left unopened, a mystery that stays buried with Alice. Or maybe it's the key to finally moving on. I don't know. I guess we'll find out eventually. For now, we're taking things one day at a time. The future feels uncertain, but at least we're facing it together. That's more than I could have said a few weeks ago. I'll keep you all updated if anything else happens. And thanks, as always, for the advice and support. I don't know where we'd be without it. Update 4. I didn't think things could get more complicated, but here we are. After we got the DNA results, Linda reached out. She said she wanted to talk just her, alone with me. That already felt weird, but I agreed. We met at the same coffee shop, and she looked more nervous than the last time. The first thing she said was, "There's something you need to know." Apparently, Alice had been hiding more than just her affair, or whatever that night was, with my husband. According to Linda, Alice had been in and out of some pretty dark stuff over the last few years. She didn't go into full detail, but she mentioned something about Alice getting involved with a sketchy group of people during her travels as a nurse. She hinted that Alice might have been using them to feel some sort of thrill or escape from her life, but she wouldn't say much more than that. Linda's voice dropped to almost a whisper when she said, I think she was trying to pin the baby on your husband to protect someone else. I was floored. Protect someone else? What did that even mean? I pressed her for more details, but all she could say was that Alice had confided in her about some guy she met during one of her work trips. A guy who wasn't exactly someone you'd want involved in your life, let alone your child's life. Linda said she never met him, but from what Alice described, he was trouble, big trouble. The kind of trouble that makes people want to disappear. And she thinks that Alice, in her twisted way, decided that having my husband be the father would be better than having this mystery guy in the picture. Now my mind is spinning. If this is true, what does that mean for Alexis? Is she really my husband's daughter? Or was Alice just trying to protect her from this other guy? And if she is his daughter, what does that mean for our future with her? I've been struggling to believe any of this. Alice had always been so put together, so controlled. But the more I think about it, the more the pieces start to fall into place. Her distance from us after the party, her secretive nature, even her sudden decision to keep Alexis away from my husband, it all feels connected now, like she was trying to juggle too many lies at once. I haven't told my husband yet. I don't even know how to bring it up. How do you tell someone that the child they're finally accepting might not be theirs after all? That they might have been dragged into something much darker than either of us realized? Linda begged me not to tell Alexis anything yet. She said she needed more time to figure things out, to see if she could dig up any more information on this mystery man. She's worried that if we move too fast, it could blow up in all our faces. I agreed, but now I feel like I'm sitting on a ticking time bomb. And then, because life isn't cruel enough, my husband found out about the conversation. I'm not sure how, but he confronted me the other night, asking why I looked so anxious. I tried to brush it off, but he wouldn't let it go. So I told him. I told him everything Linda said. He went silent, just stared at me like I had slapped him. Then, out of nowhere, he asked, "Do you think it's true?" I didn't know what to say. I honestly don't know what to believe anymore. The worst part is, he's starting to spiral again. The panic attacks that had calmed down are coming back. He's talking about getting another DNA test, maybe one with more extensive markers to rule out any doubt. I can't blame him, but it feels like we're back at square one, questioning everything all over again. In the meantime, we're still going to therapy. It's helping. But now there's this new layer of uncertainty that's making everything harder. We haven't even figured out custody yet, and now we have this new nightmare to deal with. I feel like we're trapped in some kind of twisted soap opera, and I'm just waiting for the next plot twist. It's exhausting, and I'm scared that eventually, one of us is going to break under the pressure. Oh, and about that second video, goodbye? We still haven't watched it. Part of me thinks it might hold some answers, but I'm also terrified it could make things worse. What if she admits to everything? Or worse, what if she doesn't, and we're left with even more questions?